Reminder to the public that this meeting is being recorded.
There we go. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. My name is Joyce Linehan, and I humbly serve on the Board of Trustees for the Boston Public Library, and I co-chair with Evelyn Arana-Ortiz the newly created Strategic Community Engagement Committee, and I am officially convening the first meeting of this committee. So I want to welcome the committee members, the BPL staff who are here, patrons, and others who are joining us today. I'd like to open with a welcome statement. The trustees of the Boston Public Library reaffirm our commitment to racial equity and to principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion more broadly. The library is formally committed to becoming an anti-racist organization in response to systemic racism, inequity, and injustice prevalent in our society. We acknowledge also that the Boston Public Library's Central Library stands on land that was once a water-based ecosystem providing sustenance for the indigenous Massachusetts people and is a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. We are committed to land acknowledgements for all locations at which we operate. We reaffirm this commitment to set the context for our planning, deliberations, and public engagement will take place from the spirit of welcome and respect found in our motto, free to all. With that, I would like to ask Pamela Carver to take roll call for the committee.
Sure thing. Can you upgrade China Tyler for me, Jay? She's in the public session. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to call out your last name. If you could just acknowledge that you're here for the record. Arana Ortiz. Evelyn?
I said here. I said here.
Oh, sorry, you were muted. Joe Berman.
Here.
Michelle Coleman.
Here.
David Leonard.
Here.
John Linehan.
Here.
Joyce Linehan.
Here.
Miles.
Here.
Nam Pham. China Tyler.
Good morning. Here.
And Pam Waterman.
Here.
Wonderful.
Pamela,
Amari,
Samawa's here.
did I skip you, Zamawa? I'm so sorry, Zamawa. How could I forget about you?
I'm
Thank you.
here. Thank you.
And Amari Jeffries sent a note that he's unable to attend due to a conflict at work.
Great,
And
thank
you have
you,
a quorum.
Pamela. Thanks. Okay, now I'd like to ask Caroline Driscoll, who's counsel for BPL, to give a brief overview of the Mass Open Meeting Law as it pertains to this meeting. Caroline?
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Caroline Driscoll, and I am the BPL's legal advisor. I advise the library and the Board of Trustees. I also liaise with the city's law department. This morning, I wanted to provide just a brief overview of the open meeting law. I was also going to touch just very briefly also on the public records laws. I think it does come up quite a bit with committees. So if you'll indulge me just an extra minute, I'll be very brief. The open meeting law, for those of you who might not be familiar, governs how meetings of bodies, public bodies, such as this one, function in Massachusetts. Major requirements include things like what we just went through, this exercise of a roll call and making sure we have a quorum, which is a simple majority of members. Holding the meeting in public, which these days we're doing via Zoom. We're waiting for the governor to issue perhaps new guidance about what will happen as we hopefully come out of COVID, whether we need to go back to all in-person meetings or some hybrid form. So we will keep you updated as that changes, but for now, we're meeting on Zoom. And these meetings are open to the public. They are recorded. They are available for the public to review later. Another major component is that we take notes of what transpires during these meetings, and those notes are also available to the public. The meeting notice is typically posted no less than 48 hours before the meeting so that the public has an idea of what we're going to discuss. There are exceptions where different issues come up or there's an emergency and we add to the agenda as needed. I guess one other topic is that we do allow for public comment. Public comment is not required under the open meeting law, but it is a good practice. And I think the BPL has a track record of encouraging public comment from those who are interested in what we're doing. So that's it in a nutshell. This is a very, as Joyce can tell you, I could go on for hours about the nuances of the open meeting law. If you have individual questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. Pamela has my info, but that's sort of the high level overview. Open meeting law, keep it public. That's kind of my saying. And very briefly, the next area that I just want to talk about is the Massachusetts Public Records Law, which tracks the Federal Freedom of Information Act. We refer to it colloquially as FOIA. For those of you who haven't worked in the public sector, what this means basically is that all emails and documents exchanged with us or among committee members that pertain to business of the committee are subject to disclosure if we receive a request, a public records request from a member of the public. So this includes emails, documents. It also includes text messages. If you watched, following the news with the Boston School Committee, this topic of text messages has come up and has led to a bit of drama about what is or is not a public record. So my advice is always, if you are texting with each other during a meeting, assume that that text is a public record until further notice. There are some exemptions to the public records law. For example, if you are emailing about a very personal matter, a medical condition, that type of thing is exempt. Or if you email me as legal advisor to the BPL a legal question, that communication is privileged and is not subject to disclosure unless we waive the privilege. So the bottom line with the public records law is just think before you send. We just like to make sure that folks are aware of that because as we've all sent emails that we regret, and we just have a bit more scrutiny over what we do at the library. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions. You can feel free to reach out to me personally. My info is on the BPL website, and it's also, if you contact Pamela or the president's office, you can reach me. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them, or that's what I have for today.
Thanks, Caroline. Anyone have questions for Caroline right now? Because she really can talk at length about open meeting law. She's
I
very
have a
good at
quick
it.
question.
I appreciate all of it. Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
So this public access framework, or the temporal limits, it's just listed to the time of our meeting?
Yeah, yes and no. So if this meeting ends today and you send Joyce a lengthy email about your thoughts about subject, whatever, that email is considered a public record. Even if it's sent on your personal email, if it discusses the business of this committee, that is considered to be a public record. Now, what happens, so say someone asks for your email, we'll ask you, we don't, your personal computer is your personal computer. So if we do get a public records request, we kindly ask that you share anything that you have, although we don't have the right to come in and take your computer. Does law enforcement have the right to do that? Yes, if there's a subpoena, that brings us to a whole other level. Again, this is where I could get into hours of discussion about this, but if you're emailing about the topic at hand, then, or something that's on this agenda or some other committee business, for our purposes, we would consider that to be a public record. Okay.
Any other questions for Caroline? Hearing none. Great, thanks, Caroline.
Joyce, if I could just add, if we could just make a note for any members of the public, if you'd like to sign up for public comment, please do so under the chat at this time. We'll call on you later in the agenda.
Thank you, Pamela. Great, so, so this is our first meeting, so a little bit of table setting is in order, I think. It's meant to be a dialogue. I think it's going to be a little bit more unstructured than some of the meetings that we're used to having, because it is meant to be a conversation. If committee members have questions, I know it's awkward on Zoom, but by now we all know how to do it, right? The easiest thing to do would be to use the raise hand function. Chat can get a little clogged up, so probably better to use raise hand or just speak up. It's a small enough group that I think we can manage to avoid chaos. As envisioned by our chair, Priscilla Douglas, this committee should serve as ambassadors in their neighborhoods and communities for the Boston Public Library. She has said that time and time again. And libraries, and our libraries in particular, are viewed very favorably as important pillars in their communities. But as it is with everything, there are people missing. And Priscilla has asked us to figure out who they are and how we can engage them. So when we talk about engagement, we need to define what we mean when we say community engagement. You know, this is a really old example, so maybe it's not that helpful, but I like to think about, you know, when I was young, Adams Street was my branch. It was a great little world for me, and I spent a lot of time there and learned a lot of things there. And when I got a little bit older and discovered the Central branch, it was a complete eye opener, like a whole nother level of being able to see my world through different windows. And I think about that and think about even the connection between branches. You know, I've been lucky enough to live in three service areas. I've had a home branch of Adams Street, Codman Square, and now Lower Mills. So have gotten to know each of those spaces and their personalities and their staff and things like that. And that's been a really rewarding experience. So we've talked a lot about, and David, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but maybe you can touch on this a little bit. In the past several years, we've talked a bit about branch libraries and their emerging personalities, you know, emerging themes in the context of, say, Upham's Corner, which I was pretty involved with in my time at City Hall. The new library there is meant to have a sort of arts subtext or text attached to it. You know, East Boston has a maritime history interest. There are different branches that have different themes or personalities, and it might be a good idea to think about how those are emerging and how we try to develop sort of a cross-cultural, cross-branch understanding so that people feel that all of the branches are there to serve them. David, do you want to say anything about how the library is thinking about those things?
Yeah, I'd be happy, because I think part of these questions are of this moment now, but they also come out of a shifting context and shifting orientation of probably about the last 12 to 15 years. And, you know, if my colleagues and the chair indulge me, we may want to think about asking Michael and Lisa to move their thoughts a little further up the agenda if it's germane, but let me do my version of setting the table as well, which I think builds on what you've shared from your own thoughts and Chair Priscilla Douglas's thoughts. If you think back prior to the library world of maybe 12 to 15 years ago, the focus was very much on the buildings themselves. The library was the building and maybe what was contained within it. And our disposition was, you know, we'll help anybody, we'll welcome anybody once they come through the doors or come to us behind our desks typically. So a little bit more introverted and a little bit more inward focusing, but nonetheless doing great services, and you know, your own experience I think bears that out. You know, my predecessor and her staff talked about, you know, we need to bring the library outside the walls and into the community. And I think today's opportunity is really to build on that and think of the library. Yeah, the building's important, the collections are important, the staff's important, but the services are really what comprise the work of the library and its impact on people. And that can happen anywhere. So in some ways, this is also, I think, about becoming a more intentionally extroverted orientation in connecting to our communities. I also want to, you know, note this word outreach that you will see, which really has two very important definitions. One looks at outreach as really a form of marketing and invitation, and let's go find people and invite them either to come to the library or participate in services. And the more formal definition of outreach is really one that says outreach is providing library services in spaces other than the ones that are owned by the library. So I think that's one whole aspect of this. It's really about connecting more deeply to our communities. I also think that in today's world, there's more of a premium than there used to be on doing things with, not just for. And so building a culture where we collaborate more directly with members of the community really helps unpack and deconstruct some of the challenges that exist around equity in general. So ongoing community engagement may indeed build some models or explore some forums where we are inviting our community to build services of the future with us and ideas of the future with us. So I think that's more of a conceptual and abstract framework in answer to the question. And I'm sure Michael and Lisa, whether now or a little bit later, will be able to share some more thinking about some specifics.
Thanks,
Joyce,
David.
was that helpful?
Very, very helpful. Why don't we take the question that's here from John Linehan, no relation, and then go to Michael and or Lisa. John?
My apologies. Very quickly, just listening to both of you. So have those themes or individual library personalities been developed with community input, or was it done independently?
No, I mean, usually, well, the East Boston one that Joyce referenced really comes from historical tradition. And the Upham's Corner one is a great example of being the product of some city strategy and deep community conversation about the future of the neighborhood, which in the case of Upham's Corner now thematizes a set of developments as being about arts and innovation. For example, at Jamaica Plain, we added a digital makerspace as part of that. With the Roxbury branch, we, in response to the community's needs, have developed the first nutrition literacy space in the system. So sometimes it's thematic in a neighborhood-wide sense. In others, it's really more about adding a special character or a special dimension, such as with Adam Street, it was a dedicated music performance space. So I think there's a range of ways in which that specialness evolves and not in a vacuum.
Great, thanks, David and John. Michael or Lisa, do you want to weigh in here or move your presentation up? Does that make sense?
Can I just ask a quick question, Joyce? Does everyone see the agenda?
I do.
Yes.
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 If we are going to stay
Okay,
in
I don't see the agenda.
conversation, would it be better to go to gallery mode for a while?
Sure, we can do that. You want to stop the share?
Thank you.
Perfect. Look at that, people, love it.
So sure, I can certainly talk about what I was going to talk about a little bit later, and then also bring it into the context of this conversation now, if that would be helpful. David already did this pretty well, but for our internal purposes, we've been using community engagement as the term to talk to people outside of the building about the services we provide inside the building and try to encourage them to come and sign up for library cards, things like that. And then we use outreach for that other more formal definition to provide actual services outside of the library. We still sometimes use them interchangeably, but there is a slight difference. But let me tell you about some of the things that our departments are doing, both in the past and now. As you might imagine, outreach and community engagement has been challenging because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're doing less interaction with people in person. We did take advantage of the summer and do a lot of outdoor community engagement, and I'll talk about some of those as well. Let me start with youth services, because youth services has a long tradition of providing outreach and community engagement, and probably our deepest form of outreach is with DYS, the Department of Youth Services, and serving incarcerated teens. There are 5 units currently. Formerly there were 9. That's a good thing that there are less units now, because it means there are fewer teens incarcerated. So we're working with 5 units, and traditionally it's been about meeting with the teens, doing book talks to get them excited about books, bringing books that they can check out, and then also letting them reserve books so that we can, the next time the librarians go, they can bring the books that the teens want. This year, we were very excited. Our teen technology specialist in Teen Central proposed a technology addition, a pilot to DYS to add another component around technology. Technology is challenging with DYS because they cannot be connected to a network, and there's a lot of limitations on what they can do. But she developed a really wonderful technology curriculum based on STEAM, and we purchased equipment like 3D doodling pens and then laptops that we keep stored on the sites. And we're doing this pilot with 2 of the 5 units, teaching them technology skills and using STEAM as the curriculum. So that was really exciting component we added this fall, and we're hoping to do more of that and expand it to the rest of the units going forward. Some of the great community engagement we took advantage of the nice weather for this summer was we did a series of story walks in collaboration with the Boston Parks Department. And those are where we blow up images from picture books and post them in parks. So as families stroll through the park, they can kind of follow along the book and read the book as they move through the park. So that was a really nice way to do that. We've also done a lot of tabling. We do tabling at all sorts of outdoor events where we provide a couple of library staff to give out library cards, to talk about the library and inform people, and do giveaways. So we go to lots of farmers markets, the one in Copley Square, Roxbury Crossing, Brigham Circle. We go to community centers. We did a lot of back to school events at Kroc Center. We collaborated with the Institute of Contemporary Art and their Playdates series. And we did a lot of work with the Emerald Necklace and the Arboretum, doing some tabling at events throughout the parks. So that's what our youth services team has been up to. Our department called Community Learning, which is created really to do services out in the community and out in the neighborhoods, utilizing branches where appropriate, but also going to community centers and other organizations to provide services. They started pre-pandemic and are planning to start this back up this fall, is they would take neighborhood jaunts. So they would walk a couple of miles. They did this down Washington Street from JP to Rosendale, and basically just stopped in at every business and organization along the way and asked them, you know, how they were doing and what they needed, and talked about what the library could do for them. And they found those incredibly helpful. The first one they did, as I said, before the pandemic, that was the first time they realized that the biggest thing on everyone's minds at the time was housing. So we've actually been thinking about ways we can address housing through the library. So they're planning to do more of those this fall. 2 of their members, we have a community history and digitization specialist and a literacy instructor, have come up with this fantastic program. They're literacy and local history walks. They did the first one in East Boston and then the second one in the Back Bay, and they're going to do more of them, where they basically combine literacy, ESL, a component where they talk about grammar and language as they're walking through the neighborhood and talking about the local history, the importance of certain sites in that neighborhood around local history. As I said, the first one they did was in East Boston. They had a huge turnout. They had about 25 people just walking and just strolling through the neighborhood and talking about both grammar and local sites. And people are really excited. They presented to the branch librarians, who are all very excited, and they're all interested in doing things for their own neighborhood. So we hope to expand that as well. And then they do things like work with partners to do the East Boston Memoir Project, that they're working with older adults in East Boston to develop memoir writing skills, which not only teach them writing skills, but also talk about identity and reflection and looking within and things like that. So those have been very great outreach and community engagement areas. Our research services team is gearing up to do a lot of outreach and community engagement to colleges and universities where they have a nice standard relationship. Our branches, our neighborhood services team are working with branch librarians, asking each branch to create a community engagement plan for the branch. The branches all do community engagement in their neighborhoods. It can be challenging sometimes when they have unexpected absences or people are out, but to have a plan so we can actually know who are the partners they're already reaching out to, who are partners that they could use help reaching out to. So those are, they're developing those plans now. All the librarians on the staff, both who serve adults and children, are working together to create nice, well-rounded community engagement plans. To address briefly some of the conversations about branches, as we know, communities change a lot. I think East Boston's a really wonderful example of that. When we opened the new East Boston branch, we knew it would be successful, but we had no idea how successful it would really be. And it just continues to be a place where families come and just overrun the library in the best possible way. So that's been a really great, however the things we plan for, we usually plan for the tone and personality of a branch based on community input in the renovation process, as David referred to in Roxbury. We got a lot of information of what they wanted to see in Roxbury that turned into the nutrition lab. But as I said, you plan the best, but you have to, of course, remain flexible too, because as you move forward, the community could change. You might need to add new things. So we're, instead of creating specific spaces, we're trying to create spaces that can, that we can change and adapt to. The learning lab in Roxbury is a great example. It's a very flexible space for both computer teaching and sewing classes and things like that. So it's great. And then the last thing I wanted to just talk about briefly is the community engagement we do through partnerships. We have both strategic and programmatic partnerships that Angela leads the coordination of the strategic partnerships. Just to name a couple, Company One, the theatrical production company, Grub Street Writers. Those are great ways to reach audiences that we don't traditionally easily reach. And it's basically aligning with their missions and the audiences that they are trying to reach that usually overlap well with us. And we have great success when Company One does a production here. About 50% of the people who attend are people who have never been to the library before. And about the other 50% are people who have never gone to a Company One production before. So it's a really wonderful partnership to expose the audiences to both organizations. And then programmatic partner examples, we have great success in many of the series that David actually moderates. Our New England Historic and Genealogical Society. We see a great increase in audience by partnering with an organization like that can bring people into some of our programs. We also partner with World Boston, who's an organization that focuses on international relationships. That's not an area the library generally focuses on. So it's a wonderful way to reach an audience that have those interests that we don't share. So I mean, we share the interest, but we don't do a lot of work around it. So that's the stuff I wanted to talk about. I'm happy to take questions now if you want Lisa to go, and then we can both answer questions.
Either way works. Anyone have questions specifically for Michael, or do we want to hear from Lisa first?
Hi, Michael, this is Evelyn. I have a quick question.
Sure.
Do these partners, regardless if they're strategic or do you have like is there a centralized list that branches access to, or each branch has their own list, or how is that information shared among the branches?
So we're working right now, and maybe Angela could actually speak to this, because Angela, of course, has her list of the strategic partners we're currently working with. But we are working on a CRM, a customer relationship management software, where both we in the Central Library and the branches can add outreach partners so we can have a large database. Angela, you want to just speak briefly?
Yeah, and the database also has a capability where we can connect the partnerships. If there's two different organizations that are collaborating in a partnership, the database has that capability. And also we can add additions if the partnership with a specific locations. There's an area that's called relationships. So there's a lot we can do. So it could be a resource, not just for continuing librarians, but for new librarians that are coming in. who can have a better understanding of what is going on in their neighborhoods or who has resources available for them.
And then do we also keep track on that list if they are minority-owned businesses that have registered with the city and things like that?
We are in the process of integrating this new database, so we have not included that information yet, but I believe there's capability to do so.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Michael, thanks for recognizing Angela. I know that she's relatively new to BPL, and so it's great to see more capacity added to that strategic partner kind of outreach.
Oh yes, I'm actually not new to the BPL. I've been here for 10 years.
Right,
but
new
in
to the
youth
job,
services, though. But this is my new role. Yes, I've been in this role for a year. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. I actually wanted to ask about a few particular groups and what we were doing in terms of outreach to them. And those would be senior citizens, residents of the Boston Housing Authority. And I wanted to go a little bit more in depth on college students at some point, because glad to hear that outreach is happening. But I know that in terms of workforce development, retention is sometimes difficult. So I think the library could be a really amazing tool in trying to convince college students here to stay here, to live here. So just wanted to ask about those three groups in particular.
Sure. We do a lot with older adults, both here in the Central Library. We have our Never Too Late programming. We do a lot of that work. And then our community learning team, a lot of the programs they provide, they do a lot of work around digital literacy and helping people with technology. A lot of that is aimed towards older adults. They get a lot of response from that group. We're in the process, I need to check out where we are with this. We're in the process of reinstating a pilot of home delivery for people who can't get to the library to get them books. And we work closely with Age Strong to find out like what kinds of things they would like us to do and how we can help them. So I think with older adults, we do a pretty good job. The BHA and the housing is a challenging one for us. And I think that's an area we're interested in expanding and doing more. We've done several informational programs. We do work with legal services, and they provide free appointment-based, like they drop in once a week and are at different locations for an hour or two, and they will take appointments. So those legal consultations can be about any subject. And college students, yeah, it's an area. We have a new head of research services who is very interested in reinstating that outreach to the colleges and universities. And the workforce development work we're doing is also very much aimed at both teens and adults. So I think you make a really good point about the retention and working with colleges and universities around that piece of it, because we are about to hire our first career counselor who will actually help us to connect with, we do a really good job preparing people for the job search and the interview. But now with a career counselor, we hope to close the loop and actually help connect people to the job seekers, the people who are looking to hire people. So really to close that loop, so we can help prepare them for the interview, but then also connect them to recruiters and certification places and other areas. So I think that's having the career counselor would be a great way to help college students with retention.
That's great. Really, really happy to hear that is happening, and would love to personally explore the senior outreach, because I think that Age Strong does an amazing job for people who find their way to Age Strong. But I think there's a whole bunch of isolation out there that services like library services could be really, really helpful for with seniors who are not finding their way to organizations like Age Strong, especially elders of color and low-income elders as well. John, did you have a question?
Good morning. This is Nam. So sorry, I'm out of town and I missed the hour, the change of hour. I thought the meeting wouldn't take place until another half hour. Sorry.
Good morning, Nam. We're happy to have you.
Thank you, Nam. I've acknowledged you for the record as well.
Yeah.
Yes, I had a quick question, and I apologize if it was probably in the package you sent us that I read a long time ago. Do you have GED programs going?
We do. We do GED test preparation classes. through our ESL departments. We also have a really wonderful program, which is, it's currently called Career Online High School, but we're transitioning to a different program where people can actually earn their high school diploma through this online tool that we have that we're actually going to be expanding statewide using our state funding and some private funding so that anyone in the state will be able to take part. And we've had really good success with that.
Great. So as we think about the question, how do we define engagement? I think we just heard a whole bunch of really, really great examples of engagement that's happening. And I think there's probably a path to deeper engagement depending on capacity in a lot of the programs and initiatives that are already happening at the BPL. So that being one of the questions we've been asked to think about, what is engagement? Let's keep that in mind. And Zamawa, I see that you have a question.
Not so much a question as a comment, Joyce, but maybe I'll wait until Lisa does her presentation because some ideas are starting to come to mind. So I hit the raised hand a little too soon.
Okay, wonderful. Lisa.
Good morning, and any day that starts with good ideas from Zamawa is a good day. So hi, I'm Lisa Pollock. I'm the Chief of Communications for the Boston Public Library. I oversee a staff of myself and 3.5 others on the marketing communications side, and then 3 on the web services side. I organized my thoughts around a little bit of a SWOT analysis, strengths and weaknesses and opportunities. I don't see too many threats, although there are some, in action being the greatest of them. But in terms of our strengths, we do have a really good broad reach. Our newsletter reaches upwards of 250,000 people. Our socials are well followed with 32,000 on Twitter, 40,000 on Instagram, and 50,000 on Facebook. So we do have a strong reach. We have a very good reputation. I mean, any communication strategist would be overjoyed to work in an institution like this, which already starts with a halo effect. And so the crisis communications piece of the job is a little bit lower than in other city departments where I've worked. So that's great. We have, in terms of strengths, very, very broad range of programs, but that also leads me into our challenges. We are so diverse. We have 26 locations. And when I first got here, like, okay, guys, what are our key audiences? And the answer was everybody. And when you're thinking about strategy around marketing, that makes it extremely, extremely challenging. When everything is a priority, it's really hard to prioritize. So I would say that our diversity is our strength, but it is also our communications challenge. As I indicated, the communications function is centralized, with a staff, very, very small staff. And what that means is that we are not able to sort of dig as deeply into some of the branch stories as we would like. You heard from Michael about all of the wonderful new programs and services that are coming online. But if a librarian's out in the community and nobody knows about it, did it actually happen? And so as more things come in, we begin to have a capacity challenge. One of the wonderful things that is happening right now, and all honor and glory to David and also to the city budget office for saying yes, we're adding 2 headcounts to our shop. One will be a digital manager and content creator. The other will be a junior public relations person. What that will do is free up the PR side of the house from social media, plant it where it belongs with a subject matter expert. My goal there is to free up capacity to do more of that deep marketing into communities of color, traditionally underserved communities, and getting deeper into the branches. So I'm very, very hopeful that the addition of this capacity will increase our reach, hopefully substantially. In addition, on the capacity side, we have a greater responsibility, I think is the right word, around translation into other languages. And that's kind of a big current challenge for us. We outsource our translation, and that takes time. And as many of you know, communications does need to be responsive and nimble. That's a thing that's slowing us down a little bit. In terms of opportunities, I mean, the world is our oyster. We have myriad opportunities. I think that we can do more micro outreach. There's a whole world of possibility out there. I think we have an opportunity to integrate our communications more with what our partners at the City of Boston are doing. That is a monster reach that sometimes amplifies our messaging, but I think very often even our city colleagues don't know the full story of what's happening here at the library. I think we have a remarkable opportunity to do some focus groups and demographic research and prioritization. Like, who are our key? We know what our priorities are, around youth engagement and workforce development. But really, who are we trying to reach? I think about programs like the Homework Assistance Program, where we're having trouble really getting at what the core demographic is, and I think there's an opportunity there to do some research and better understand who our customers are and how they get their information. I remember having sort of an interesting moment where somebody told me that there was a particular community of color that got most of their information via their local, sort of small radio stations. And I thought, aha, that's interesting. And that's a thing I didn't know. So, one of my goals is to glean more information about how people actually get their information. Joyce, to your point about seniors, yes, many more of them are using social media now. They're not necessarily getting our messaging though. We've actually in the last year or so started using direct mail more. And I think we will continue to rely on that. Everything old is new again, but I think there's so much, there's so much signal to noise that I think sometimes just dropping something in somebody's mailbox can actually be very, very effective. So my focus for the next coming years is really about patron acquisition and spreading the word, reintroducing people to their library. The dream is a gigantic marketing campaign. These things are costly and take time and resources, but if you ask me what the dream would be, that would be it. And I'm more than happy to take questions.
Thanks, Lisa. Anyone have questions for Lisa? Feel free to just pipe in. Or
I'm
John,
sorry.
go ahead.
I was just wondering what percentage of Boston residents have library cards?
That is a great question, and one I will find out for you.
Okay.
It's huge. David gave it to me a few months ago, but I can't remember what it was. I can find it too.
Rose. We'll look that up while we're
We'll get
chatting.
that. I remember being very, very pleased with the number.
I mean, just last year we had over 70,000 people sign up for e-cards during COVID. So that's a thing that happened. We actually noticed that the number of e-cards that we've signed people up for has actually doubled since 2013.
Hey, good work. We have a lot of questions. Michelle, go ahead.
This is really more of a comment than it is a question, I should say. This summer, I participated in a program at the Roxbury Y, and in listening to the fantastic offerings that you all are describing, one of the things that occurred to me is I do think it is a challenge, and this is a question that needs to be dug in more deeply, how to get the word out, because while some programs are really, really successful, as Michael described at East Boston, there was an awesome art and meditation class offered at the Roxbury Y. I mean, it was phenomenal. We meditated, we painted, there was collaging, there was drawing, and there was such a small turnout. And I didn't for the life of me, I didn't understand why the room wasn't busting at the seams, because especially with all of the current, fixation on wellness. And also the fact that it was free, I just didn't understand why more people, why it wasn't standing room only, but it was only like 5 people, 4 people. So I wondered, how to penetrate so that people could know about the fantastic offerings. Plus the library is so beautiful. It's just a beautiful place to be, especially during the pandemic. If you're anything like me, you want to get out of your living room and get into the world in safe ways. And so I do think it's an important question to drill down more deeply on how we get people to know what's happening.
And Michelle, that is the key question, right? I mean, that is the challenge. The really big challenge on the communication side is that we have 12,000 programs every single year that are just as good. And so, I mean, the scope is massive. And so, I mean, we could keep an ad agency very, 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 very busy just, in what happens in a month. Something. So yes, I'll leave it there. But yes, it is a challenge. Yes, it is something we are thinking about. And no, I don't have a pat answer for you just now.
I think it's also good to make note that we have noticed that attendance at many of our programs is still generally below what we expect. And I think that's largely because of still uncertainty around the pandemic. And people are just not coming back as quickly as we might have thought at a certain point. So when that changes, we'll see, and hopefully we will get them back.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I was going to mention that. I was at a friend's meeting not too long ago, and it was really, really sad to listen to all of the programs that everybody's done year after year, that they're just afraid people are not going to show up at this time around. Hopefully we're rounding a corner on that, but I think it is a valid concern. Dayron?
Sorry, I just wanted to comment on that. This might be anathema at some point, but we might all maybe consider doing fewer programs, but more marketing and targeting. That will be, very difficult for an organization that takes so much pride in every single thing that we do to absorb, but it might be the right strategic answer to some of this. So we should take prioritization perhaps more seriously. And Joyce, I'm glad you mentioned the friends groups. I think at some point, indeed, this committee should take up the question of how best to involve them, and particularly the stronger ones, in the question of strategic community engagement. I think they are a channel, they're great partners, they are resources. In some cases, they also put on programming, often in lieu of the branch librarian, and reconciling that with the overall goals in a way that respects everybody would be an interesting conversation to have. So just want to park that in the parking lot for a future conversation.
And if I could amplify, Joyce, if you don't mind, if I could just amplify something that David touched on right there, is that, very often in community, the way to drive people to an event or a program or a series is interpersonal relationships. Word of mouth is also a very critical form of communication, and sometimes it's the most effective method of communication, right? If we're doing a great program and we've got flyers and we've got social and nobody's following us, but yet a member of the friends group tells 3 of their friends about this program, that's really, it's actually what social media was based on. It's trusted relationships. And I think that the more we can leverage our people who care about us and arm them with information to go out into the world and spread the word, I think that will be a very, very effective way of getting the word out. Sorry to interrupt you, Joyce.
No, not at all. That's great. I think actually that was going to be an ask at the end. I think I'm hoping that every member of this committee can join a friends group, first to listen, really listen, and then to try to figure out how to support the activities that they're doing. Dayron, floor is yours.
Thank you. I actually have two questions. Lisa, in reference to translation, and forgive me if I missed it, what languages currently are we prioritizing?
So it's a great question. We actually prioritize by program and by branch. So not every branch needs the same, has the same language priorities. We do tend to follow the city's language and communications access protocols. But if somebody requests translation, we go back to the branch librarian or our very smart neighborhood services folks, and we ask which languages they feel their community would need. So it's not a blanket statement overall.
Thank you so much for that. And then just a quick question about the Friends group. Does every branch have a Friends group currently?
They do, but some are more active than others, and there are a few where it's just one or two people basically keeping it on life support. And I think some of the stronger ones actually excelled during COVID, and others went almost completely dormant. So mileage varies.
David, that's super helpful. It occurs to me it might be helpful for us to know which ones are stronger and which ones might need a little bit more support. So maybe we could put that on a future meeting's agenda to discuss a little bit more deeply.
And then maybe even invite them to a meeting.
Great, thank you, Dayron and David. Zamawa?
Thank you. Sorry, I don't necessarily have a question, but I'm just having some thoughts and maybe just trying to zoom out a little bit based on what I'm hearing. And David, your point about prioritizing is one I was thinking about. I think the library is doing amazing work in terms of outreach and engagement and really being a true partner in community. But I'm also thinking in terms of all the things that are happening. Lisa, you just said 12,000 programs. That's a magnitude that's really impressive. So if we zoom out, I'm trying to think about, could we benefit from having some sort of strategy or core principles that drive our community engagement approach? And three words were just bubbling in my head. One was expand, deepen, and sustain. And I think expand relates to what are the groups that we're missing? Who are we not engaging, and who do we need to engage? Deepening in terms of what communities do we need to really forge closer relationships with, and really focus on deepening those connections, whether it's through partnerships or direct community contact in the branches. And then sustaining in terms of how do we continue to adapt our programming so it is responsive to the needs of the community. And then sort of using that maybe not as a rubric, but as a way to think about where do we need to put more effort and how do we prioritize the work that we're doing and the programs that we're designing so that we're really focused on where are we most needed and where do we need to put more resources to address that. So those were just some ideas that were starting to bubble up in my head.
Thank you. That's great, Zamawa.
If you don't mind, I just want to react. Those are great ideas, Amal. And I think, so we have done some form of what you're talking about, looking at core principles and focusing based on themes, thematic issues that are happening across the city or across the country. At various points of time, we focus in on things like civic engagement. This year, it's all about youth engagement and workforce development. But I think we could certainly expand that across more areas. Just as a side note, due to the pandemic, we are currently not doing any in-person children's programming. So that 12,000 number will certainly be different this year. We're still doing virtual programming, and during the summer and into the fall, we're still doing outdoor programming, but the amount of programming we're doing is considerably less in the children's space, which is a big number for us. So it's actually a good time to kind of reflect and think about what is the best way to move forward around, the needs of the audiences and some of the other things you mentioned. So I think that's great.
That's great. Thanks, Michael. And this probably goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it's important to note that behind every one of those 12,000 programs is a person who wants that program to happen. And maybe it's a person and maybe it's 200 people. But the most popular programs are not necessarily the ones that we should be focused on. There's certainly a case to be made that some of the other ones will deepen engagement in a way that will actually allow us to achieve whatever goals we're going to set here. Evelyn?
If I may, Joyce, it's interesting that you say that because a colleague of mine, she keeps telling me that we should bump up our librarian recommendations because in our newsletter, because those are the highest engagement. And I keep saying, no, we want to push them farther down so that people have to scroll through all our other offerings because it's really about what people are stumbling on. So it's really interesting that you said that because that conversation happened yesterday. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Lisa. Evelyn?
Thank you, Joyce. Michelle, I want to thank you for calling out that program. That's a program that was generated through the Fellows Athenaeum program, which is a committee that I chair. And outreach and advertising the programs has been a challenge. They're incredible programs that the committee launches. And sometimes, if the outreach is not there, participation is not there, some of those programs get cut in the following year. And just so you know, these programs, people submit RFPs with proposals. The committee evaluates, approves, and then they launch. And it's really important. The burden, they use the library to advertise. They use, various methods for outreach. But it has been a challenge. So it would be great, to gather ideas, how to spread the word. Because as you said, not only we're supporting people from the community launching these programs, but they are great programs. And we don't want to cut them because the lack of attendance. So how do we balance that has been a challenge for quite some time. But thank you for calling out that program because it warms my heart. It's one of the programs from the committee.
Evelyn, if I could just quickly respond, I would welcome the opportunity to sit down and have coffee and brainstorm with you. Happy to.
Lovely. Thank you.
And then really quickly, I'll just respond as well too. I have found through my years of overseeing programming is the most successful programs we have are ones when we can partner with other external organizations because they can drive directed audiences that are interested in the topic to our programming. And we talk about this all the time. It takes a lot of effort to do that, but we need to carve out more time and maybe, if we do a few less programs, we can spend a little bit more time finding the appropriate partners to help us expand our reach to the right audiences.
Thank you all. Joe, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I want to respond to something, and don't want to debate it, but I want to point out the flip side, Joyce, of something you said, where you said, behind every program, there are people, even one or two people who are interested. But, the other side of that, I think, and we have to be cognizant of it, is behind every program is a library staff person or more than one staff person who's devoting their time to these programs. So I think one of the challenges I think we're going to face is, in time of limited resources, how do we prioritize the use of resources of the library to make sure that, we're getting the most bang for our buck. And it's not necessarily how many, the most popular programs are the ones that have the most attendance, but the ones where we really think we're making an impact. And I think, we need to keep that in mind as well. I also now, if I could, just have a question, probably directed at Michael more than anybody else, and I apologize, I had to jump off and take a quick call, so I might have missed this, but do we do anything with civic education and sort of media literacy and especially for teens, sort of basic stuff about sort of how to be a citizen in democracy, how to tell, I don't mean to be political about this at all, so don't take it this way, but fake news from real news. How do you get your information? How does democracy work? That sort of stuff. Do we do anything like that?
We do. Thank you for that question. That's great. I did mention that civic engagement was one of our big priorities in recent years, and that's still something we focus on. We do that through quite often through series of dialogues called living room conversations or there's another one too, and it's really talking about a lot of the issues in a safe space where people can express different viewpoints. But the media literacy is really wonderful. We have a relatively new librarian position that she started during the pandemic, which is our media and journalism specialist. This was one of David's interests to really push forward to. She's on our community learning team, and she has been doing a whole series of workshops and classes on exactly what you're talking about. And she's actually met with our, she is in an adult department, but she's been working with the teen librarians as well to think of ways to do some programming around media literacy for teens, both passive programming just to have information for people, but also active programming where she can do workshops and things with people. Her one of her workshop was sparked such interest that the Hartford Public Library in Connecticut reached out to her and asked if she would do another iteration of the workshop in collaboration with them that we offered to both Boston residents and Hartford residents. So that was really great. So it's been a nice addition to our team.
Great. That's great to hear. Thank you.
Thanks,
There's
Joseph.
also, if I can just follow up, there's a really good, I don't know very much about it, but I do know that it's really well respected, a good program at Harvard called Educating for American Democracy, which is focused on high schools and maybe middle schools, but I think mostly on high schools, about this whole issue of civic engagement and among youth and civic knowledge and that sort of stuff. So that's just something to maybe keep in your mind.
That takes us, I think, where we want to go beyond the programs that Michael has described that are extant right now. But the state clearly has a new mandates around civic education in schools. And so there's an opportunity, I think, for us to play a role that's complementary to that, leveraging, partner organizations like Generation Citizen, the iCivics work. Many of the colleges, Harvard and MIT in particular, Tufts also have work in this space directly. And it maps precisely to, I think, the next chapter in what our relationship with the schools, BPS and others, should be around this topic. Of course, if that's a new priority that I or we are introducing, then the corollary has to be, should we stop doing something else in order to support that? Another difficult question. That's all I'll say on that for now.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, both of you. John?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Are you able to record patrons or when they get a library card, their first language, and then subcategorize by that, for translation, et cetera?
I don't know the answer, but boy, do I love that idea.
It's a great suggestion. We don't currently, but we can certainly look to see if that's something we can add.
And philosophically, John and others, I want to just note where we are. Our base principle of card registrations has always been to absolutely only collect the most minimum amount of data required in order for someone to access services. That's typically been name, address, maybe date of birth if they want to give it if they're a young person. That's it. That's in tension with our new desires to better understand our communities and who we serve and what their needs are. So we have some work to do around what the new compromise would be. And one presumes that any additional data would only be on an opt-in basis, but it would be incredibly enriching and informative for for both the development of programs and the marketing and outreach efforts that are envisioned.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to interrupt, but couldn't you do it sort of as a voluntary add-on questionnaire? Yeah.
Just a couple more, thank you. Are you guys collaborating extensively with BPS? I say this because my wife's a teacher and found that, 80% of her students didn't have library cards, and she facilitated them all getting library cards. And, in fact, her superintendent walked the whole class to the library. For many, it was their first time there. So wondering about collaborations like that.
It's a very large organization as a whole, the BPS in particular, to collaborate with. We have a great relationship at the most senior levels, and on some of the ground level relationships between the branch and the local school, where it works really, really well. I think we'd love to see that grow. And maybe as we get through, new city leadership phase for next year, we'll have a new opportunity to re-engage across the board. I will say that though, for the first time this year, we pre-enrolled every single BPS and a few other schools as well, student in having a library card, so that all they have to do is show up and activate it. So we're continuing to build the relationship and to do so tactically where we can. I think the getting your first library card is a gateway event in your life, but it's only, like any key to any door, it's only as useful if you start unlocking doors with it.
Well put. And my last one, and this is more of a comment. One of the initiatives we've started about a year and a half ago is what we call a co-design program, where we are actually working within the community on program development, so that it is a collaboration, so that we're not just saying this is what they need. This is, different communities can tell us what they need, and we see where our skills and abilities overlap with their needs. And so it's still under development, but it's a direction we're going in. It's a little intensive, as you can imagine. So I know you guys are a much bigger organization, so I don't know if it's, but anyways.
John, we've actually talked about that in the context of our teen services, because there are several teen programs across the country in big libraries that have done this kind of program development, having the teens themselves develop the programs they want. So it's an interesting thing that I think I'll bring up with them again. Thank you.
Thanks to both of you. And John, I'm going to back it up even further from BPS. When I was at City Hall, some members of my team set up a program where they partnered with BPL to table at the birth certificate window at City Hall. And they were making sure that babies who were just born were being enrolled for BPL for library cards. We're going to go to Pam, and then we're going to move on, so we're not here all day. Pam?
Hi, yes. First, full disclosure, since you pointed out that you had no relationship to John, I just want to point out that Michelle and I are actually married. I don't know if it matters, but I want to put it out there immediately. And so I've been sitting here thinking, how can I possibly be useful on this committee? I'm here because of the Museum Book Award relationship with the Boston Public Library that sponsors a talk by our winner. But with my personal hat on, I am sitting here as somebody who used to be addicted to the library as a kid. And then I had my library card, and then I sold my soul to the digital world, and I download all my books on my Kindle, and that's where I've been. However, I am married to Michelle, who is a library addict. And so I'm thinking, even with Michelle in my household, constantly trying to drag me here or there, oftentimes to the library, I have been like this reluctant participant, but sitting on the committee, I'm just like, oh my God, the library is amazing. Like, all of the programs that you're talking about are fantastic. So I'm thinking, how do you sell it to me? Like, what will it take to circle back to folks like me who were, I grew up with coming home from the library with a stack of books so high I couldn't see over it. How do we market all of this stuff to people who might have fallen away from the library in the last, say, maybe 10 or 12 years? How do we reach out to people who have shifted from physical books to digital books? How do we sell all these wonderful programs to people whose vision of the library is stuck somewhere 12 or 15 years ago? I don't have the answers, but yes, I know, dear. I know Overdrive is amazing. And I think one thing to focus on too is there are a lot of people who started using Overdrive in the beginning when it was a little bit clunky, and now it has become a lot easier to use, but you may have lost a lot of people. And so this idea of sending out something to lax library card holders or former whatever, and just saying, we're amazing now, come back and check us out again. I think that if I got something in the mail or wherever that's like, yeah, we know you used to be here all the time and you stopped, but check us out now, that might be really awesome.
Pam, I'm so glad to hear your thoughts. And similarly, I'm actually the daughter of a librarian, and my first job was in a library, and I got here and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. So you are not alone. You know, I think part of the answer to your question, honestly, is finding those people in a targeted and strategic way that we can manage, figuring out, you know, what the demographic would be, and then how that demographic gets their information. I mean, because when I was talking before about wanting to spend the next couple years focusing on patron acquisition, what I probably should have said was patron acquisition and reacquisition, because I think there are a ton of people out there very similar to you who just, you know, potentially haven't even been inside the Central Library since the 2016 renovation and have this image of, you know, a sort of drab, David's face, a drab, brutalist, unwelcoming building, when that is completely the opposite of who we are. So, you know, I feel what you are saying deep in my bones. And I look forward to finding those folks and strategically reacquiring them. You're absolutely right.
Thanks to both of you. Zamala?
Thank you, Joyce. I know you wanted to move on, but I just had a kind of a quick thought in terms of how we're defining community engagement. We started, you know, the conversation with sort of a definition of sorts, but now, you know, as we've been talking a lot more, I think it would be helpful if we all had sort of a common understanding of what we're defining as community engagement as we go forward in this work as a committee. In terms of, is it, you know, the emphasis on programming? Is the emphasis on some other type of strategy? Like what is it, right? And what is that balance, so that when we're thinking about capacity and resources, you know, we're kind of looking at the full picture. So I'm just, you know, it's just a question that's starting to come up for me.
Well,
my desire, and I think if those of you who remember my interview for this job, Zamala,
I was there, David.
will one of my dreams is you could walk down any street in Boston and you interview someone and ask them, what are your top 3 institutions in Boston? The library has to be one of the 3 answers. So it could be programs, it could be borrowing books, it could be digital, it could be fill in the blank. But as long as we figure, then we've got our community engaged. But sorry, no, I'm doing what Joyce didn't want us to do.
No, that's great. That's actually perfect, because that's exactly what I was going to bring us back to, which is we have some important questions to answer, and I don't have the answers. I think we've started to scratch at the surface, but one of the questions is how are we defining engagement, right? Very big question. We also need to figure out what should be the goals of this committee, which is related to that definition. What are the deliverables, and what's an appropriate timeline for those deliverables? I have no answers. These are the questions that we need to think about, either between this and the next meeting, or at the next meeting, whatever seems to work for the committee. But those are the things that we do need to figure out. Sorry, I see Rep. Tyler has raised her hand. Rep. Tyler.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm sorry to not be on camera. I wanted to actually go down that road a little bit, Joyce, and you know, in defining a little bit more, what's the objectives of this committee. And so one of the things that I hope to do as far as answering that question is to be able to, you know, look geographically around each one of our libraries, because they are unique in their own way, and they are placed in the different areas for a reason, because we're hoping to uplift each and every neighborhood that they're in. And I would like to look geographically in each one of those areas and try to figure out, like, what are the main issue topics, and what are the main concerns, and what are the main needs of the individuals or the residents that live in that area, and kind of use the libraries that are in each one of the neighborhoods as a launch pad to be able to address those areas. So if we can figure out a process to kind of start that and kind of uplift that method, I definitely would appreciate that. In the Boston Public, in the Roxbury branch, which we know we have our own subcommittee, we started to go down that road a little bit and have been really successful as far as ensuring that programs that are offered at the Roxbury branch match the needs of the direct abutters. And I'm very, very pleased to be on that committee. And so I would like to, offer that style up to this committee and hopefully be able to address the needs of Bostonians on a more acute level than what we have been in the past.
That's great. Thank you, Representative. That sort of harkens back to what Lisa said, and that is that the world is our oyster here. You can think about things like trying to use the Boston Indicators reports to kind of figure out where there's potentially some activity that could be done in specific neighborhoods. The Boston Planning and Development Agency has an amazing amount of research on what the assets and deficits are in each of our neighborhoods. So it could be really interesting to, you could really go down a rabbit hole and try to figure out some of those needs. But those are the big questions. And I don't think we're any close. I think while there were a lot of great ideas on today's call, and we're no closer to answering the questions. So we're going to need to spend some time trying to figure out how to do that. And I'll have a conversation with Priscilla and figure out whether it would be best to try to do some talk about this in between now and the next meeting, which has not been scheduled yet, I don't believe, or to just table it for the next meeting. I think we're probably going to err on the side of the former because Priscilla was pretty clear about the fact that she thought that our timeline for this should be about a year. So we don't want to waste too much time. I do want to leave time for public comment and remind folks, if you do have public comment, if you want to just flag in the chat that you want to say something, that would be great. I think Pamela has already heard from a couple of people in advance. Sorry, Nam, did you want to say something? I just saw your hand flash up.
Sorry, I just wondering if we ever had kind of open house at the different branches to invite the community to come and see us. Hey, look what we have now. We are no longer your grandfather library.
Well, my grandfather never saw the inside of the library, but I take your point. And David, I think you were doing some thinking about this in terms of welcoming folks back post-COVID. And I don't know whether that stuff happened or it's still in the process.
We actually thought we weren't sufficiently post-COVID to do it yet. So Lisa referenced it a little bit earlier. Right now, I think there's probably a moment in early 2022, hopefully not as late as spring, but we'll be talking about where the right moment is to like reintroduce the library to your community. And maybe Pam's idea of targeting our lapsed library lovers would be another way, another dimension to that too. But I think, why don't we think about incorporating Nam's concept of a localized open house and actually market it and promote it. So it's not just because, well, we're free to all every day. So how would that be different? But we can do an event or a promoted event that would I think excite maybe our branch teams as well as the community to do that. So it hasn't happened yet, and we can incorporate this and perhaps other ideas as we go forward.
I think that's great. And I would ask you to stagger them because I'd like to go to all of them, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
This might be a good time also to mention the Roxbury celebration, which will highlight that branch in particular, David.
Certainly. To those of you who don't know, on October 23rd, which is Saturday morning, we will be doing a celebration of, it's kind of part ribbon cutting because they never got to do a ribbon cutting during COVID because we opened in the middle of the pandemic. But at the same time, it's just about a year since we actually started providing in-person service to that community on a limited basis. And so it's part celebration, and we'll do a ribbon cutting as well, just because we should. So October 23rd, there will be the Saturday morning program to celebrate the opening of the Roxbury branch of the Boston Public Library at Nubian Square.
I predict a great celebration will take place that day. So that's great. Thank you. Okay, and I wanted to reiterate something I said a little bit earlier. I would encourage you, if you don't already belong, this is for the committee members, if you don't already belong, to find a friends group, whether it's the one in your neighborhood or another one, maybe one that's struggling particularly with numbers, and go and listen to what the friends groups have to say and what their challenges are. That might be a good way for us to figure out how we can support those groups, which do really care about the libraries and drive some of the programming that's happening at the branch libraries. Dayron, go ahead.
Thanks. Joyce, do you think that you all could send us a list of the friends groups and the folks who are in charge, the leaders? Great.
We can.
Yeah, and I was gonna, is there a schedule of those meetings? Is there sort of a master list of when they meet or anything? We have to go into sort of group by group?
Like David said earlier, some are more organized or some are more active than others. So yeah, there's
Sort of
no
have to
master
go group by group. Okay, that makes sense.
Yep, exactly. Okay, I think we are ready for public comment. Pamela, you had somebody? Yes.
Actually, I just need you, Jay, can you put up the
Yes.
agenda? You have to ask for a new business first, Joyce, and then we'll go into public comment.
Okay. Any new business? Great, hearing none for now. We will move to public comment.
Thank you, Joyce. I figured with the new group, we wouldn't have any new business, right? Everything is new. We do only have one person that signed up for public comment, and that is David Vieira. Just take a second for Jay to undo his mic.
David, you can unmute and speak whenever you're ready.
Fortunately, I'm having a problem.
Oh, we
Hello?
can hear you now.
We can hear you now.
Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know me, my name is David Vieira. I'm on the board of the Citywide Friends of the Library, former president, and presently the liaison to the Branch Friends Library groups. And it's very encouraging to hear this group talking about involvement of the Branch Friends groups in this organization, because very often the Branch Friends groups, who are your strongest advocates, are not involved with decisions that the library's making. As a case in point, earlier this year, a memorandum of understanding was signed with the city regarding the procedure for nominating trustees to this board. And it was done without any public input, which was very discouraging, because when this board was expanded to 15 members, the intent was that there would be representatives of the friends groups on the 15-member trustees list. So I think that's something that needs to be revisited. On a totally different subject, at the beginning of this meeting, a couple of comments were made that dogs might be attending the meeting, and it was hoped that someone's dog would wait until the public comment hearing. And I thought that was extremely disrespectful of the public that you serve. And I'd like to know who it was that made that comment, please.
It was me, and I apologize that my intention was not anything like that. I was noting that since I was going to be speaking for a lot of the meeting and being unmuted, that and my dog had been a little bit agitated this morning, that it was likely we would be interrupted by her. So I apologize if that was taken in any other way.
Well, you specifically said that you would hope that the disruption would occur during the public comment meeting. And I find that
actually, I did not say that. Actually.
I think that might have been me. That might have been me.
It was a gentleman. It was a gentleman.
That was me. This is Joe Berman. It wasn't meant to be that way at all. I was just trying to make a joke. Maybe it was a bad one at my dog being a member of the, that he would wait until public comment, because that would be appropriate for any member of the public.
I do not find that to be in the essence of a joke. And I don't think your public, who you're supposed to represent, consider it a joke. It goes along with another comment that was made earlier this year at a public comment, at a public meeting on the public record, that one of your trustees stated that her engagement with the public usually ended up being, and this is a quote, a bitch fest. And these aren't the kinds of things that the public is looking to see from their Board of Library Trustees. And I hope that in the future, all of you will take into account the fact that although you've been appointed by a mayor, you're there to represent the people of the city of Boston, and you need to show them a little bit more respect.
Well, I
Thank you
certainly
very
intend, I apologize if you took it that way. I certainly intended absolutely no disrespect.
Thank you, Mr. Vieira.
And Joyce, that's all we have for public comment.
Great, thank you. And thanks to the staff who facilitated this meeting. Really appreciate it. Pamela, I think I understand that we don't actually need a vote for adjournment on a meeting like this. Is that right?
Correct.
Wonderful. It was great to see all of you. Thank you for your time, and to be continued. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, thank you.